Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back for another positive talk. Hopefully, all of you had a good week. We made it to Friday. Got two positive talks today. Super excited about both of them. So, hopefully, all of you had a good week. Have some fun things scheduled for the weekend. I know that I've got a pretty chill weekend scheduled because I had a pretty crazy, hectic, fun weekend last weekend. So I thought I would give myself some time off and just kind of relax a little bit this weekend and try to get some things done. But Stevie up, and then we will go ahead and get started. Hello,
Hey there.
how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. There we go. My
I
face
haven't been
is.
alive in forever, so I'm like, oh, what's really up in front of my face?
I know. I feel like the queer talks that you were doing, they were so good.
They were, but then medical school hit.
Gotta love medical school.
I love medical school. I have a little bit of space now, hence why we're doing this today.
I'm glad we were able to kind of get one on the books and things
Yeah,
are kind of starting to get a little less crazy for you.
yes, indeed. How's everything with you?
Woo! I've been on a roller coaster ride and I'm just making the most of every moment and just trying to make good decisions on this journey. So it's definitely been a roller coaster.
I hear you. I hear you. Trying to come down from the roller coaster a little bit, right? We all need to come
Yes.
down from the roller coaster.
Yeah, I actually went to an amusement park last weekend and rode one of their very old roller coasters and I've been doing like nonstop stretching all week because like I pulled so many different things with
Oh
like
my.
just being thrown around on that roller coaster. I was like, they should just tear this one down.
Uh, well, hopefully you're feeling a little better, a little more stretched out, shall we say? A little
Yes.
more at ease.
Yes. For those of you that didn't see any positive talks really happening this week, yeah, that's why.
That's why.
Awesome. Well, I will let you introduce yourself. I know that we've done a live before, but that's been a while ago. So you can introduce yourself and then we can jump into a discussion.
Sure. Oh, I always am like, how do I introduce myself? I have so many things going on. So for those of you that don't know me, some of you might know me as Future NMD Yogi. I have another Instagram page that Drummond and I initially met on. Um, or actually, we met on Clubhouse, but nonetheless, whatever.
Yeah.
um, so I am a yoga therapist. I'm a future naturopathic physician. I'm also a Buddhist teacher. So I have a lot going on. I have for me, all of this has kind of come together on my own healing journey. And so I practice a lot of tools myself. I engage in a lot of, you know, spiritual practice and self-care practice from my own struggles growing up queer and trans and all of that. So yeah, so I just started this page, Queer Trans Thriving, like last week, in order to focus on training people in the holistic health and integrated medicine world how to properly work with the queer and trans community. Because as everyone here probably knows, we have um, a certain set of ways that we need to be treated healthcare because of our identities and because of traumas that we may have experienced. So my that's the message of this page, is that I'm here to not only teach healthcare professionals but also to teach queer and trans people, you know, how to live healthy and live their best life, even with their identity. So um, I know it's taken a lot of work for me personally to get there, and I know that probably everyone listening feels the same way. So, um, yeah, I just wanted to come here today and kind of talk about that, and also whatever else. I know I know there's some big news out in the world. A lot of us woke up to some really sad news today with the Supreme Court. And the only thing that I want to say in that regard, because I feel utterly enraged inside, is that, and this goes for everybody, you know, one of the biggest messages that I have here is that it shouldn't have to happen to you personally for it to matter to you. And that message goes for persons with a uterus. And, you know, those of us without a uterus need to fight harder and need to get louder and a lot angrier, because this is insane. So I will leave it at that, and we'll move on to talking about LGBT health.
Yeah.
So how
I
about
mean,
that?
I think that when it comes to all of that, with your journey embracing yourself fully, I think that like we are complex human beings, and I feel like when it comes to being young, growing up, we have to kind of break away from what we were told we were allowed to be or what we could be and learn what we can be. And then learning how to embrace that in a world that doesn't really teach us how to embrace ourselves. Like,
Mm-mm.
we live in a world where corporate America wants us to not love ourselves because then they can sell us stuff. And
Absolutely.
I think that that's an important thing for people to realize, as well as when you're not being your authentic self, you're spending and using so much of your energy to hold up this false world that you're trying to carry. And when it comes to like the Roe versus Wade being reversed, and it takes energy and effort and time and commitment and fight to make things like that not happen. And
Yeah.
a lot of us, I'm seeing so many people wasting energy in places that they could be putting it towards things that will actually change the world for the better. There are definitely things out there that are worth fighting for. And I
Wow.
think that with everything that's been going on, we're exhausted. Everyone
Yeah.
is. And there are so many things being thrown at the LGBT community specifically that it almost seems like you have to pick and choose what you want to use your energy for the day, because if we try to fight it all at once, it feels like it's just overwhelming and all consuming. And it's just important for people to realize, like, rest is just as important, self is just as important, because if you destroy yourself, then you don't have anything to fight with. And we need everyone like at 100% so that we can make sure that everything's going in the right direction, because women's rights have been taken away today, but I mean, the LGBT community, we know that it has not been that long ago that we fought for ours and still are in so many different ways. And just because we've gained this doesn't mean that they can't take it away.
They're moving in that direction. Marriage equality's next, and Clarence Thomas just verbalized that today after this ruling. So it's just unconscionable to me. I know a lot of us in the queer and trans community feel particularly enraged because this is, you know, conservative Christians living trying to, you know, put their agenda onto the entire country. And it's just, yeah. And this is I think this, you know, this message of what's happening with Roe versus Wade, and, you know, potentially in the future taking away of marriage equality, is, you know, why those of us in marginalized communities and living as, you know, marginalized identities have to take extra care of ourselves, because every single day of our life is a fight, almost, for some more than others. And it's, you know, we can't change things if we're not, if we don't have tools and practices ourselves to wind down, to ground, to be able to process through experiences that we've had in our lives or experiences that are presently going on in the world. And yeah, and especially for those of us that are living with embodied trauma from conservative Christians. um, or for other extreme little part in the integrative medicine world to help train clinicians, train yoga therapists like myself, train nurses, train acupuncturists, other holistic practices, how to effectively work with our community, because there's really no standards really in caring for this community. There's an organization right now called the what are they? The World Professional Association of Transgender Health, who hasn't released new standards of care in a decade. They're supposed to be released this year. So updates in regards to standards of care, like these are important guidelines that we can use to help take care of the LGBT community. So those will be released. They were supposed to be released in April, but they still haven't been released yet. So I'm just stating that to give people a resource if they're looking for a resource on, proper LGBT healthcare. But there's other organizations like the University of California, San Francisco has a phenomenal guidelines for LGBT health. There's other organizations, the American Psychological Association is a good one. Even the American Medical Association can be a good one. So yeah, I just wanted to come on here and talk about that today. For those of you that aren't familiar with what the phrase integrative medicine means, you may have heard phrases like allopathic medicine, or you may have heard of like these individual modalities such as acupuncture, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine. What integrative medicine means is it's an integration of combining conventional medical care, so allopathic medicine using pharmaceutical drugs and surgery, which is kind of fits under the allopathic medicine category. It's integrating that with these indigenous healing traditions, such as yoga, such as Ayurveda, such as traditional Chinese medicine, other holistically oriented practices. And I really think that this is not a conversation that's had enough in the queer and trans community and just more broadly in healthcare, because as I was saying earlier, the queer and trans community have a certain set of needs given the trauma that we've experienced because of our identities that has to take into account the whole person. And yeah, Reiki and pranic healing too, absolutely, Brian. And unfortunately, allopathic medicine, as much as I support it, physicians don't always take into account the whole person. Like we can't drug ourselves out of trauma. And so that we have to be able to provide people with other tools and people with other contexts for healing, so that we can heal those things and live our best lives. So that's what I'm working on is getting professionals within the integrative medicine world more competent on LGBT care. But the thing is that as professionals, for me as a white person, I can't be fully competent on the Black experience or the Native American experience. But what I can do is educate myself to the best that I can on their lived experiences. And that's, there's a phrase, cultural humility, like all of us, and this goes back to the abortion issue, regardless of whether you have a uterus, you can have the humility to sit down and to not only sit down and listen to people with a uterus, whether it's a trans man or a cis woman or an intersex person, have the humility to not only sit down and listen to them and listen to their story, especially those that may have needed an abortion, but also do your own work. In yoga practice, we have this idea of svadhyaya, which translates as self-study. Like, do your own work, do your own study to become more competent. Does that mean that you're going to ever be fully 100% competent on these topics? No, it doesn't. But we all need to be doing this inward work so that we can all stop perpetuating perpetuating these harms in this world. So that's the one, I think, shared thing between medicine, between many the Christianity. um Growing up as a pastor's kid, I don't know if I mentioned that on here. Drummond knows that, but part of the reason that all of this enrages me even more is because my father is a minister and a Christian pastor, and so I grew up around these things, and so I I fight to make these things known, so that all of us can live in a safer environment, where all of us can be nourished and thrive, and have loving and nourishing relationships, and not be walking down the street being beat up by these crazies. So I don't know. This is all coming together. I hope what I'm saying is making sense, everyone.
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to all the different types of like medicine, when it comes to technology, when it comes to pretty much every area of focus, I think we've all seen things like, okay, these could all be integrated really well in a way if we could communicate in a way to where people who are prescribing medication versus people who are like, you know what, there's other ways, if they weren't just like saying absolutely cannot talk to this person, they believe this, they believe this. And I think that that's a big struggle with Christianity as well when it comes to an organized religion. When you have such a strong belief system that your belief is the only truth and that everything else is false, you don't allow yourself to integrate other knowledge and other things to help you grow and understand the world around you. And I think that you see the biggest growth, you see the biggest advancements when you see people with different mindsets from different ways of growing in this world come together and share their knowledge in a way that they're like, you know what? Technology is growing very quickly. When technology and medicine come together, like there have been extreme advances. When it comes to like religion, a lot of times there are very, very slow, if any, growth in the churches that I've seen. And the ones that have kind of adapted are the ones that are still kind of creating a community outside of their own churches. And I think that
Right.
the least, like when you see groups of people who just stay within their bubble and don't go out into the communities that they serve, because you're not just a Christian, you are whatever your career path is.
Right.
So
Has to be
if you're going out into the world and you have to see other people. You can't see other people and just say they're wrong. You have to see them and realize that we all hold our own truths and our own correctness. And when you take time to understand one another, it's amazing the information and like changes that can be made just because you're not so focused on I'm the only one that could possibly be right in this situation. And unfortunately, there's a lot of systems in place, and medical is no exception when it comes to this is how it's been and this is how it shall be. There are definitely people in places of power that are not growing as quickly as the science that we have been discovering. And unfortunately, that has a negative impact on a lot of people who aren't represented because, I mean, I've seen several like documentaries where they talk about a lot of like the numbers and stuff where they're like, this is where things should be medically, and where certain types of people, because maybe African American people have different numbers that equate for what should be the range that they are looking at. And if they don't fall in within the range that the hospitals have set, then it's like you don't get this type of treatment, and it's impossible for us to grow if you don't realize that every unique individual needs to be looked at on a case-to-case basis. It's not everyone is the same. It's never been that way.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Here's the thing that we're talking about topics of like integration of science and spirituality and all of these, because all of these topics are inherently um, integrated, talking about integrative medicine. Um, the unfortunate thing is medicine in and of itself has done a lot of division. Medicine as a human endeavor, as science as well, has always been intrinsically controversial, I would say. It's always been up for debate.
Yeah.
Um, but the, and then in regards to, in regards to that divisiveness that has been created, we've kind of, in the medical world, I fully 100% support science. First of all, let me let me be clear. Um, but there's a point at which, especially in medicine, especially when you're caring for human needs and human suffering, there's a point at which you have to recognize things beyond biology, and that's the human soul, that's human nature, that's the self. And I think that that's what's so important, is that we've, even though we may not fully understand how these what is categorized as kind of like alternative medicine, even though we may not scientifically understand how some of these things work, if it is supporting and nourishing a human soul and helping them heal on a spiritual level, then it needs to be integrated into medicine, because medicine isn't just about let's look at your vitamin D levels, let's look at the growth of a cancer tumor. Like the worst thing that medicine has done has been divide the body between, literally divide the human body between mind and body and spirit. None of those things are separate. They're all integrated. And so we need a medical system that is integrative of these concepts. And there is this separation today, but there are a lot of allopathic physicians that are recognizing the harm that has been done in dividing the human experience into mind, into body, into spirit, and separating them. That we are whole persons, and we, especially as LGBT persons, know that we are whole persons. That includes our sexuality, that includes our gender identity, that includes our lived and embodied life experiences, that includes any medical conditions that we may be diagnosed with. So we all, I think in these conversations, we all need to be of the mindset of being more holistically oriented and broadly integrating, broadly integrating ideas such as science, such as spirituality, such as economics, such as, things, we're living in a time where we have massive access to information, but everything's still so separated. And I think I know from my own spiritual practice that it does not serve us to live in this idea of separation. Separation creates suffering. And if we are suffering, then, and we're not working on ourselves, then we're perpetuating suffering. I think that's, some the things that I connect with in the Dharmic traditions, yoga and Buddhism, that have really helped me heal personally. We're all interconnected. Everything is interconnected. And so how can we bring that awareness into our daily lives so that we can cause as little suffering as possible? And that's not just in medicine, that's in life and in all of our career endeavors. Is that question of how can we reduce suffering? How can we live in integrity? So I don't know where I'm going with this, but
Yeah.
a rant.
I think that any time that we try to hide a part of ourselves or pretend like a part of ourselves does not exist just because we don't believe it will be accepted or acknowledged, or society at some point has told us that it is wrong, I think that we are doing ourselves a huge disadvantage and disservice, just because to move forward, to be one with yourself, you have to bring it all to the table. You can't be like, you know what, I'm going to bring it all to the table except for this because my faith said it was wrong, or society says it was wrong, or my boss said it was wrong. And I think that a lot of times people aren't doing that work of understanding themselves versus what they're being told they have to be. Because I think that there's a really big difference of our identity versus the identity that we are told we are allowed to have. And if you don't do the work, and a lot of times when I'm working with clients as a life coach, like that's the biggest hurdle to overcome is I'll ask them a question that should be simple because it's about them. I'm not asking them about the world around them. I'm not asking about other people. I'm asking them questions about themselves. And we're not taught to look at ourselves and ask ourselves those questions. We are taught that the outside world has all the answers. And in a lot of instances, like a lot of the answers we have within ourselves. We just have to ask ourselves and take that time to cleanse ourselves of what the world has put into us to believe that we are not enough, that we are not complete without something else. And when you were talking about like the medicine, like there are so many different instances where like people are depressed, people are dealing with anxiety, they're dealing with so many different things that they just hand them a pill for, and they're like, this will make you better.
Yeah.
But we don't do any of the work around that is causing that for us to have to deal with. Because a lot of instances, and the example I always use is like, if you have people around you saying you're worthless every single day, and that makes you depressed and that makes you feel worthless, a pill doesn't make you not feel worthless. You have to start doing the work, and you have to start putting in your mind that that's not like the label that you should have. Like that's something that someone else is putting on you. And a pill, it can help. There are things that can help, but there are also many other things that you have to do on top of that to kind of rid yourself of all that negative energy that keeps circulating around you. And yeah, doctors don't talk about the experience. When it comes to the traumas of the LGBT community, that's not talked about. I've never had a doctor ask me about that. Like, it's almost as if they're afraid to ask that kind of question. Even when I went in with issues that those types of questions probably would have benefited the doctor, like, I had to bring it up first. And in a lot of cases, like, that's scary. Like, that's not something that LGBT people walk into the office knowing to ask. Like, if we can't even answer questions about ourselves, like, how are we supposed to know this information will probably be helpful to a doctor sitting in front of me?
Yeah. Well, the thing, I have so many thoughts in my mind in response to that. Like, oh, where do I start? Um, First, I mean, it's certainly important for everybody to know doctors are human beings, and I cannot stand the fact that our modern medical system has created the narrative that doctors are gods. We're not fucking gods. I mean, I'm not a doctor yet, but I will be. Um, and because it just there's been this narrative. I mean, your grandfather, I think you said your grandfather was a surgeon, Drummond. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Both of
Yeah.
our grandfathers were surgeons. My grandfather was an orthopedic surgeon, and there was a time when doctors were seen as like these infallible entities in the world, that they are the end all be all knowing. And I can tell you right now, going through medical school, I'm not going to know everything as a future physician. And well, that's why research is important, but nonetheless, yeah, and this is exactly what you said. This is my mission, is that doctors and nurses are not educated um, about these things in their medical education or nursing education. Um, and I think it's not an excuse, but the reason that I bring up that doctors are humans is because they are human. They are working through their own issues, and they may not be doing this work themselves. You know, the unfortunate fact of the matter is that the way that you're trained in medical school is often the way that you're going to practice for the entirety of your career. So if you're not trained to think holistically minded while in medical school and to look at a complexity of everything that is happening in regards to someone's health, you're just gonna, get a patient in. You're gonna say, okay, you have diabetes, and I'm gonna send you out with some insulin and have a good life. Like that's not how medicine is supposed to be practiced. Um, Unfortunately, we've created a system around practicing medicine that way. But things are changing. And the more that we talk about these things, the more that, even the allopathic physicians are who didn't get training in the way that I'm being trained in medical school are starting to say, hey, yeah, we need to move beyond this model of medicine, because it's not working. So that's why getting out there and like actively teaching clinicians about what it means to provide like whole person centered, LGBT affirming, gender and sexually expansive affirming, whatever you want to call it, healthcare, is so important, because it's certainly not. I know. And you know what? I have to give a shout out to my medical school. They have begun to integrate some of this into their medical curriculum, and I was a huge advocate for them to do that, and they actually did do it. So is it as much as we would like? Not really, but there has to be a starting point with these things, and I know there are a couple medical schools leading on this of like, okay, we do need to talk, like, LGBT people really exist. Like, it might be important about learning about their lived experience so that we can be better healthcare providers. So yeah, and then I forget, I had some other thoughts to share, but they went out of my mind.
I saw Michael's comment where he said, also, we're not being raised that our healthcare is our responsibility and doctors and physicians are there to help us. We need to be proactive with our own health. And yeah, I think that we need to realize, like, if our body is telling us something is wrong and we go to a single doctor, that if they say nothing's wrong, but you still feel like something's wrong, like, it's okay to get second opinions. And
Yeah.
because when you know yourself well, when you check in with yourself regularly and you're like, okay, I haven't changed my diet, my exercising is been pretty on point, something's still not feeling right, like, it's okay to kind of go with what your body is telling you and be like, you know what, like, this doctor says nothing's wrong, but I'm going to get a couple other opinions because something just feels off and it's not right. And that's okay. Like, you want to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes to, that there is a connection between our mind and body, because if someone, I feel like this does happen a lot in our community. Like I think overall trauma makes you just a little bit more sensitive than someone who maybe hasn't experienced trauma over their lifetime. So in that, we're a little bit more in tune with our bodies than the average person. And so, this is where it, I would encourage anybody who's listening to this, and I know it's difficult because we're operating in this insurance-based model of medicine where, your insurance company will only pay for the services provided from, a number of physicians. But if you can, please, as a patient, do research on the physician that you are about to see. Look into I see it on a lot of like websites now, whether it's a hospital website or even private practice websites. Physicians will write a little statement about their philosophy on medicine. Like, read that. And if they are practicing more holistically and they identify with practicing in that way, then go see that doctor. Another suggestion that people may not understand, well, it first of all depends on where you live, but generally speaking, osteopathic physicians, you'll see so a post-nominal is like an MD or a DO or an ND. Osteopathic physicians, DO, doctor of osteopathy, they are a little bit more in their training holistically oriented, and just people in our community need to know that. So if you can, in your medical care, search out specifically for a DO. Like if you see a DO behind their name, seek them out, because they're going to be a little bit more holistically minded. If you live in a state where naturopathic physicians are licensed to practice, seek out the care of a naturopathic physician, because I would say we're the most holistically oriented. And those would be states like Arizona, Washington State, Oregon, Vermont, Maine. What else? I'm trying to think of other states. New Mexico, Idaho. Those are the ones I can think off the top of my head. But yeah, so unfortunately, given the circumstances of our healthcare system, we as consumers of medicine, so to speak, have to be educated about how we are going to receive the best care. And that's what I'm kind of hoping, that I can do on this new Instagram page is, not only empower healthcare providers with the knowledge how to provide LGBT affirming healthcare, but provide us as those in the LGBTQ community with the information necessary to receive the best healthcare possible. Because medicine is complicated. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. And so I hope what I'm saying is helping those that are watching, and is going to help those that will watch this later. And I do want to say, if anybody ever has any questions about any of what I'm saying on here, please do contact me personally, because there's unfortunately not many people doing this work. There's a phenomenal doctor on here. He goes by, his username is Queer Surgeon. He's probably one of the top gender affirming surgeons in the country. I believe he works out of the University of Oregon, it might be. But he's in the Portland area. Follow him. But yeah, there's not many physicians doing this work. There's not many people out there like advocating in this way. So please reach out if you have any questions in this regard. Dr. Carlton, for the gay boys, well, for the men having sex with men, Dr. Carlton's phenomenal. His username is Dr. Carlton. He's a medical doctor. He is phenomenal. He does so much education for our community. So he's another one to follow. I'm trying to, if I think of any others, I'll let it bring it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Michael's comment again. It was if you're diagnosed with something, or if it's something that's within your family, to where that that's something that could possibly be something you deal with later, like do as much research as you can so that when you go to a doctor that you have questions. Because I mean, I use the example of like going to a place to get your car worked on. I know nothing about cars, but I know that if I do research, that I can ask enough questions to where they don't think that they can just kind of one-up me on something. Like there are certain cars where you do have to get all 4 tires replaced if one goes bad. There are some cars that don't. If you don't know the difference, you can be buying 3 extra tires. And I think that it's important to kind of understand the situation so that when someone asks a question or someone gives you information, that you're like, that's not what I read, or I read something different, to where you can kind of question it a little bit to get some explanation. Too often we just accept someone who's an expert in any field. We hear them say something and we just accept it. I mean, through life, I've learned to get multiple opinions, and because I've gotten multiple opinions with several different answers, it's made it to where I can get the best help that I need in any situation, whether it's medical, financial, spiritual, life in general. I think that it's important for people to kind of realize that at the end of the day, we are our best like warrior for making sure that we get the best of whatever we're looking for. Don't just accept the first thing that comes your way because it's not always the best.
I just want to answer Bryant or Brian, I'm not sure. But Dr. Carlton, sorry, I didn't mean to
You're fine.
change the subject. I just wanted to answer his question. Dr. Carlton, the word doctor is spelled out. His username is Dr. Carlton, but you did spell his last name correctly. Yeah, I believe he calls himself the butt doctor or the butt stuff doctor, something like that.
Oh,
Yeah, he's phenomenal. He does an incredible amount of work in advocacy and education for this community. So yeah, he's phenomenal. I would suggest everyone follow him. Yes, and I agree with you. Like, don't, it's a hard dichotomy, I guess, is that you do want to seek multiple perspectives. But I think the thing that, being in the medical world, the thing that people need to acknowledge is first of, as I said, doctors are human. One doctor's perspective may not necessarily be another doctor's perspective. So that is important to keep in mind. But, I think as best we can, I was just talking about this the other day on a podcast, we have this thing called the scientific method that is the only human endeavor that we have as human beings that can rid human bias as much as possible. So what happens in the scientific method is someone comes up with, a theory about how something in the human body works, or a hypothesis about how something in the human body works. And then they do a lot of research on that and say, okay, are the results of this study aligning with my hypothesis? And if they're not, well, okay, let's go back and do more research and find the mechanism. And then what you have happen in science is that the idea is that these studies are replicated, because the more that you can replicate a study, the more that it validates the results. So you have teams of scientists, teams of experts looking at all, at one particular subject area. And this is, for example, how we were able to so quickly get COVID vaccinations out into the world within the time span of a year, because the entire worldwide scientific community was looking at how can we protect ourselves about this virus that is massively spreading all over the world. So I think we need to hold space for both this idea of, yes, individual doctors themselves, we're certainly not fallible. We don't know everything. So you may have to get a second opinion, but know at the same time that science as a human endeavor, gets very complex and complicated, but using various statistical methodologies is working to eliminate human bias so that we can see the world. And this is, one of the Buddhist teachings, like seeing the world as clearly as humanly possible. That's something that aligns with science. Is what is the truth? What is, in yoga we say satya, what is the truth of this situation? And that's really, I think, what science is trying to get at as much as possible. But I watched this horrendous documentary, and I didn't know it was going to be anti-trans at all when I first started watching it. And then as it progressed, it was just, I forget what it was called, but it was, talking about anti-trans stuff. And the producer of this documentary had multiple anti-trans physicians speaking out against gender affirming healthcare. And it's, it's a prime example of doctors are human beings. We as human beings, regardless of our titles, are inherently biased. And even those kind of looking at the scientific evidence, those having not necessarily participated in producing the research, can be biased. So I say all this to not to be harsh on science, not to speak ill against science, but for people to be educated and kind of like navigate and have a deeper understanding of what's going on in the medical world, and why I'm a huge advocate for holistic care. to our community, because we have needs that warrant holistic care. I mean, ideally, everyone should be treated holistically, regardless of what their identity is. But those particularly in marginalized communities, whether it's those who have experienced racism, xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia, whatever phobia it is, so to speak, it's important because we know, scientifically that these things have a huge impact on our health and well-being and create health disparities, and create lack of access to care, because especially for the trans community, but also for the LGB part of the community as well. It creates, when physicians and healthcare professionals aren't educated on these topics, it creates huge disparities in care. And we're going to see that now with abortion, because people are going to have to travel across state lines to get an abortion if they need to. So yeah, we have to be like, there's an idea of like systems biology, which isn't just like studying the mechanism of things necessarily, but broadly like looking at all the systems, so to speak, that can affect not only human biology, but world biology. All the systems. Climate change can affect our health. Trauma can affect our health. Politics can affect our health. Like, looking in a holistic nature about everything. I mean, when you begin to think this expansively, you think, well, how the hell are all of us alive when we have all these things coming at us, so to speak? But it's important that all of us learn to think more holistically and more broadly about these complex topics, so that we all can move and progress forward, in a way that is going to progress us forward and not take us back to the 1920s. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole complex puzzle that we live in affects each of us differently, and it's important for us to, I think, be very honest and teach ourselves how to experience it and understand it, and not beat ourselves up for like, there are so many people who are beating themselves up for not being as productive or happy or where they want to be in life, and I'm like, well, look at what you've got on your plate right now.
Right.
That's like, when you think, oh, gay marriage could just be undone, like, that puts a huge weight on a lot of LGBT people's shoulders, because
Yeah.
that impacts you financially, that impacts you like mentally, that impacts you in so many different ways. And then just thinking about all the other things, like, you've got social distancing still in play, you've got all those things. Like, I still to this day, like, do not feel the same going into grocery stores and places with lots of people. Like, I used to be able to enjoy going someplace where I'm surrounded by people. Now I sit there and I wonder if I'm negatively impacting my health in a way that I'm going to pay for later. Like, going to the amusement park this past weekend, I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, how many people touched this roller coaster? And I was just like, I've already had COVID and never want to have it again. And I'm just like, but sitting at home doing nothing, interacting with nothing, like doing everything virtual, like, that has very much impacted my like mental health in a way that I'm still trying to figure out ways to fully recover from that, on top of all the other things that keep jumping on my plate. And it's just like, you have to allow yourself to feel that and acknowledge that it impacts you. Otherwise, you can't fix it.
Right. Yeah, that's the work, is you gotta feel it to heal it, honeys. Like, that's like that. Yeah, and that's why I would suggest to people that are listening either now or going to listen to this recording, seek out practices that align with you that can help you heal, whether that's yoga or Reiki or I don't know. There's so many healing traditions in the world that can offer us the healing that we need. Like, seek that out. Um, and it could, if you're in an affirming Christian church, that's great if you feel that that's helping you. But the thing, this is kind of what I wanted to say too earlier, and I think it's so interesting because our Western then now that I've studied Eastern philosophy for like well over a decade, um, Western philosophy is so much different than Eastern philosophy. And there's this separation. Like, in Western philosophy, we want to divide everything into parts. Really, in order to understand it, and that's okay. But Eastern philosophy comes from the perspective of like everything is inherently interconnected and you can't separate it. So it's like, what? So I always encourage people to, like, you know, question the thoughts in your mind, because not everything that you think is true. There's not truth behind every single thought that goes that you ruminate on in your head. Um, so, and I know all of us can have dark days, but like, the reason that I'm such a huge advocate for integrative medicine is because it has a huge opportunity to be able to help our community. So if you're not seeking out tools that can help you learn to go within, to learn to quiet all the suffering, all the critics, all the bullshit going on in the world, and, aligning with your own truth, that's what's going to help you heal over time. And, I think, we say it's about the journey, not the destination. And that's 100% true. Like, am I, even though I've been on this journey myself, am I 100% healed from the stuff that I experienced in my childhood growing up as a pastor's kid? Absolutely not. But I look back at myself over a decade ago and think, oh my God, I'm a completely different person. So that means that healing has happened. So just find something that connects with you, beyond, if you have a medical need, certainly go get that taken care of by a doctor, and, listen to, what your doctor has to say and how they, think that your particular medical condition needs to be treated. But we also, I've repeated this multiple times, as marginalized persons, we need to seek out tools that are actually like practical tools in our daily life that are going to help us learn to better regulate our nervous system. That's a huge thing in our community, is because when we experience trauma, we have this aspect to our nervous system called fight or flight. So it's called the parasympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is often referred to as the rest, digest, and heal aspect of the nervous system. And then the sympathetic side of that is called fight, flight, or flee. And I can use myself for an example, and I think this is so common in our community. So trauma isn't necessarily a big trauma. In the case of, I hate to say it, but in the case of like sexual assault or some other huge trauma, for example, maybe going to war, like that's a huge trauma. But I would say there are micro traumas that people experience, like bullying day in and day out in school or in church, or hearing these messages from these ministers, these conservative Christian ministers that are encouraging people to go kill people in the LGBT community. Hearing these things on a daily basis is an assault to our nervous system that those in marginalized communities have to parse through on a daily basis. And because of that, trauma isn't just a mind thing, it's a body thing. You can physically feel it in your body. And so all of us in the queer and trans community need tools to help us learn to better regulate our nervous system, whether that's meditation, whether that's yoga, tai chi, acupuncture, chanting, praying, like whatever it is, whatever tools give you a sense of solace and a sense of calm so that you can begin re-embodying a sense of ease and safety in your body is incredibly important for all of us. And I don't think that that's emphasized enough. So by all means, everybody should learn how to breathe properly. Like that's just foundational. Um, so yeah, if you could, I hope that this is connecting with people. And if again, if you have questions about this or you think, well, I don't know what I connect with, well, then go explore, go try out a yoga class, go try out a Tai Chi class, go get an appointment with an acupuncturist. There are plenty of cities that offer like community acupuncture where it might be like $20 a session or $10 a session, or pay what you can, or do something that's going to connect you not only physically and mentally but also spiritually as well, because this community as a whole is in desperate need of deep mental and spiritual healing. And that's the truth for all marginalized identities. So I hope that I'm encouraging you and empowering you in some ways, but I know it can feel overwhelming. And it can feel, especially when we experience trauma, it can feel paralyzing. You can feel paralyzed by it. But there's so much online. You can get easy access to yoga classes and breathing classes and all of that on YouTube very easily. Am I saying it's going to be good quality as someone who's been teaching this for a decade? That's questionable, but like whatever works ultimately.
Yeah. And I think that the important thing for people to realize is like it doesn't have to happen specifically to you for your body to translate that into trauma. Like seeing things happen to others in our community in other places, like your body still can hold trauma in those experiences because that is a possibility for you, that has been introduced to you as a possibility now, that at once was a safe space where you did not feel that fear. So I think that people have to stop beating themselves up, because I've heard a lot of people and they're like, well, nothing's really happened to me. And I'm like, but it has. Like the physical assault might not have happened to you,
right?
But like the trauma that comes around of, I am the same as that person that hated that person for being LGBT or any other minority status, like you can feel that pain and fear, and that will go in so many different places in your body. And that still needs to be like fixed and worked on. That's not something that you need to be ashamed of just because, hey, it didn't happen to me personally. Like that still adds up, and that still leaves you feeling very much in survival mode instead of feeling like you are able to thrive and be your authentic self out in the world.
Right. Yeah, I think all of us need to be asking ourselves that question, as like, how can I personally reduce suffering in the world? And you don't have to call yourself a Buddhist or a yogi to actively be living that out. The tools of those practices certainly help, but we all need to be asking ourselves that question. And that's just not and it's not only for people that are physicians or healthcare practitioners about how can I reduce suffering. It's for everybody. We are living in a world of tremendous suffering, and we all have to recognize our responsibility in making it better. Because if we're, and this is part of the thing, this is part of the practice, is we as LGBT people have a tremendous amount of suffering. But if we're not working on healing that, then we're perpetuating suffering in this world by not healing that. Mm-hmm. Because trauma literally rewires your nervous system. And as that happens, if trauma is not dealt with, then you're going to have toxic relationships, romantic relationships, familial relationships, toxic relationships with just random people out in the world. Your entire world perspective is surrounded and encompassed around trauma. And so these practices, I always encourage people to find something that you connect with in a sustainable manner that over time will actually begin to rewire your nervous system and your brain. There's so much science and so much research on these ancient practices, Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, all of these things that are showing that we literally can rewire our brain for ease, for resilience, for thriving. It is possible, but we have to be willing to do that work. And maybe part of that work is, yes, sometimes medication may be needed. That's fine. It's fine to be on medication. I have to take daily medication myself. Um, but we also have to be doing other work to connect us and to allow us to recognize our responsibility for caring for other people, because ultimately spiritual practice is not just about caring for ourselves, but healing ourselves so that we can then be of service in this world. That's the message of Jesus himself. That's the message of the Buddha. That's the message of surely all the Dharmic traditions. And really, I would say that's the message of Islam as well. Like, all of the world religions point to the truth that we need to go within ourselves, heal ourselves, and then go out into the world and help others heal as well. So, I don't know. We're talking about all of this stuff today.
I mean, could you imagine if instead of having generational trauma passed down, we had generational healing? Like that, that would be such a beautiful thing. Like, and it's true. Once you heal yourself, you are able to see past other people's pain, and you don't see it as an attack anymore. You see it as their pain that they're experiencing. And that's not easy to do unless you've done the work for yourself first, because it is so easy to allow people to trigger you with their attacks, because people in pain or people in fear, those are the ones that they're dangerous to be around. It's like going up to someone who's drowning and trying to help them without like your life jacket or your flotation device. Like, they can pull you right back down into that place of pain for yourself, because they're looking for anything to kind of like get you to stop to pulling them where they're just feeling like they're going under. And it's so important to kind of take that journey of healing. And I mean, I've always told people, like, we've all been given gifts to share. Like, once you heal and you can go out and be of service and share your gift and share the healing process, like, the world does start to have that ripple effect where they might not send it back your way. Like, we don't go out and give to others in hope that they give it back to us. We hope that we can change them enough to have them start sending it out as well. And realizing that you were talking about like rewiring the brain, it's so important, because if you don't rewire, you start bringing in that same bad that's in there, and it feels normal, because if your body instantly doesn't want new, because new is scary. So if normal is not a good place for you because you've dealt with trauma and your brain's been rewired, you have to be aware that it's going to take some work so that you can start bringing healthier relationships, healthier environments, because our rewired brain in an unhealthy way can definitely put us in an unhealthy position, because it just feels normal to us, and normal doesn't always mean better.
Right. Yeah, and that's like part of the work of like rewiring is like, I mean, of course my kind of spiritual practice is yogic and Buddhist, so I come from, that tradition that's very centered around meditation and movement and all of those things. But like when you sit and breathe mindfully, or you meditate and you're noticing reactions to your own, to your own trauma, when you're feeling those felt sensations arise up within you, and you decide through practice, through sustainable practice, to observe those things, to acknowledge them with some level of friendliness and ease and love versus reactivity. When you repeat that and practice that time and time and time again, and you gain the skill of being able to sit with suffering, that gives you the practical knowledge and awareness and impetus to then be able to take that out into the world and to sit with other people's suffering. All of us, regardless of whether you're a therapist, regardless of whether you're a physician, regardless of whether you're in psychotherapy, life coaching, like regardless of, people that are traditionally in the helping profession, all of us need to have that skill, and all of us need to be doing that work. Because the thing about healing suffering in this world is oftentimes when it comes to healing suffering, it's not about providing people with advice. It's about sitting with them and being human. Allowing that like energetic sense of connection with another human being, which is like one of the parts of medicine that I love, is being able to sit in front of a patient who's deeply suffering and saying, I'm here with you. Not to tell you what to do, but to be here with you along your healing journey. Like that is so powerful. Just to be able to sit with another human being and say, I'm here for you. I don't have the answers. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm here for you. And for those of us that have experienced trauma in the LGBT community, where we, many of us don't know what it feels like to be in a safe environment, to be in a space which is completely non-judgmental, which is completely open and loving. Being able to be that human being that provides that for someone else, that is healing.
Yeah.
And also all of us have to be doing this work. It has to, our spiritual practice has to extend beyond ourselves. Which I think is, everything that's happened in this pandemic with people not caring about other human beings. I mean, that's just, it's so apparent.
Yeah.
The work that we all need to be doing in this world. Because any form of spirituality that just has us focused on ourselves is not spirituality. So we all need to be doing this work so that we can be helping, heal the world. And that, like I said, it extends beyond people in the helping profession. All of us need to be doing this collectively. Otherwise, how are we going to move forward? It's going to be war and famine and, terrorism and extremism. And I mean, we're seeing that play out in the world right now, not just in the US, but all over the world. So the medicine, shall I say, the integrative medicine is for all of us to be able to learn to sit with our suffering and then to be able to heal that and transform that within ourselves so that we can then go out and help others. That's all I got.
I love it. That was the perfect note to end on. And I see that we went over an hour, but I absolutely loved this conversation. I loved having you on, and I'm glad we were able to reconnect. Hopefully we can have some personal phone calls lined up here in the future. I have not been very good at that lately, but thank you so much for having this conversation. And if there's ever anything that you think I can do to help kind of promote this move that you're trying to make with this page here, let me know. I would love to help you out.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you all for being here. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, I do want to state this publicly. Being a medical student, I cannot provide you with any medical recommendations on supplements, on medications, on any of that. But what I can do, if you have any questions related to medical issues, is I can educate you. I can say, hey, ask your doctor about this. and just kind of educate you in that way. But I can't, advise on medication or supplements or anything like that yet. So I just want everybody to know that if you do have any questions about, even if it's not medication related, you have any questions related to medicine, please do reach out to me, because there's just not enough people doing this work. And not, I know Dr. Carlton and the physicians that are doing this work, they are bombarded with questions from people. So if I can kind of take that burden off of them a little bit, because there's very few people doing this work, please do reach out. My inbox is open. I will get back to you as quickly as I can. Please don't be offended if I don't get back to you right away, because I am in medical school, but I do want to help. And I look forward to helping as much as I can in the role that I'm in right now as a medical student. So yeah, thank you, Drummond, for having me here today. It's been great to have this conversation and spread the word, so to speak. I appreciate all of your support in that regard. And yeah, thank you all for being here and being a part of this conversation. And please do, please, the best thing that we can do, I think this is my last parting word, the best thing that we can do as human beings, as in the context of this conversation, but in the context of really all of these big issues that are happening in our world, is don't stop this conversation here. Go out and have a conversation, an active conversation with, with a parent, a friend, a family member. Like, we have to continue having these conversations in the world. And I know it can be scary, but that too is a part of our practice, a part of our spiritual practice. So if you can go out and continue the conversation that we're having right here today with someone else and encourage them to pass it on, I would highly encourage that and recommend that, because that's how we create change in this world. So yeah, that's it.
I agree 100%. And effective conversations. Don't waste your energy on people that aren't listening at all. Like, if they've got their ears plugged, your energy is better used with someone who will listen to you. Even if they don't agree at the end of the conversation, someone listening to you to plant seeds is better than being angry on the internet, on pages where people look at you as a completely insignificant person.
Yeah. Don't underestimate that whole idea of planting seeds. I think that's one thing. This will be the last point. That's one thing. The last point. I'm sorry. That's something I think that we can acknowledge, like with marriage equality, is that like marriage equality, well, even though we're having the issue that we are right now, marriage equality didn't happen. Like, there were so many people that were resistant over the decades of like same-sex couples being able to marry, but it was that continual like implantation of like planting the seed in someone's mind that even if in that moment they disagree with you, you're planting the seed and you're giving them hopefully the idea is that seed will bloom into some delicious juicy fruit honeys. So and that's just like, that's part of this whole thing that we've been talking about of like, neuroscientists say what fires together wires together. You, in having conversation with people, are maybe forcing them to confront certain biases that they have. And maybe in that moment, they might be completely hitting a wall and resistant to what you're saying. But that is implanting the seed that will hopefully bloom and allow them over a period of time to shift their perspective. And that too is a part of this healing work. So yeah, I hope I didn't beat the dead horse, so to speak. but we're not encouraging beating anything or anything. Yes, thank you all for being here. It's been great. Thank you, Drummond. Hugs and love to everybody. Continue fighting the good fight, but take time to go deep within and do your own healing work so that we all can have a more loving, expansive, rainbow, colorful community in this world. Because all of us deserve to live in a world that is safe, that is resilient, that we all can live our truth authentically, without harm. So hugs and love, y'all. And again, thank you, Drummond. And I will talk to you soon.
It sounds good. Have a good one.
Be well.
Bye.